Hello and welcome to Buehler's Debaters. I'm your host, Christian Gardner, and today we'll be talking about the role of gender in sports media. In this episode, we'll be talking about how masculinity may be glorified in sports, the role of women in sports media, and the weekly Jake Take. This is Buehler's Debaters. Hello once again. I'm Christian Gardner here with my panelists Robert Skowski, Ryan Clayton. How are we doing?
I'm doing very well.
Excited to be here.
All right, we're going to jump into our first question. Should women athletes be paid as much as men? Ryan, I'll start with you.
I personally do not think so, and that's a really tough question. I don't think women bring in the same viewership, which means a lot because a program isn't just a program. There's licensing rights and TV deals and different marketing that goes into these productions. So it's not the same money in a lot of ways. There was a Nelson study recently that looked back at the 2015 Women's World Cup versus the 2014 Men's World Cup. And it looked at the final game in particular, the final of both respectively. The women's average viewership per country for the final was 4 million, where the men's was 13 million. I mean, that's really tough to compare.
That's fair to say, not bringing in as much money. But Rob, what will you have to say?
That's interesting. It's obviously been a debated topic, and it's funny that you started like that. It's funny that you mentioned the World Cup because I'll get into it in a little while. But Kevin Netto, who is an associate professor at physiotherapy at Curtin University, stated that women are actually at a much higher risk of injury due to their bodily makeup, and they're actually at a 200% greater risk of injuries to the neck and head, as well as injuries to the shoulders and knees, just based on their bone structure, wider pelvises, and things along that nature. And he also did a study about the differences in performance, because there's always the statement that, males are just predisposed to do better in events as well. And he noticed that there was only a 10 to 30% difference in ability. But judging off the World Cup, as you said, the women did go make the final, and there was low viewership for that. But they were only awarded $2 million for their first place finish, compared to the men who lost in the round of 16 and gained $9 million off that. And like you said, the finals for the men's team, Germany won, and they were awarded $35 million. So with a 10 to 30% difference in ability, there was a 1,750% difference in salary and winnings. I think that is ridiculous. Based on that, they're doing the same game, same time, same training that goes into it, same hours. I think that's it. They should be awarded the same amount of money and salary.
That's very logical thinking. Now, our second question: are female athletes more sexualized than male athletes? Rob, we'll start with you this time.
Okay. I actually don't think so. I'm gonna say no on that one. I think that outside of the world of sports, such as in celebrities, such as models and things along that, women are more sexualized. But in the realm of sports, I'm gonna have to say no. A couple points on that. The Body issue by ESPN magazine, which debuted in October 2009, features both males and females at a pretty equal rate. They both had alternative covers, and since its debut in October 2009, they've been pretty equal. Additionally, according to Forbes.com, Cristiano Ronaldo earned $108 million with sponsors such as GQ, Calvin Klein, and his very own underwear line. And it's been in the media recently for Altice, which is a cable company, where it was a 30-second ad where he was basically in his underwear for about 25 seconds. So I think that the male athletes are much more sexualized. And continuing off that point, year after year they constantly are towards the top of ranks for like top 100 sexiest males or hottest men in the world. I think that the male athletes are at an unfair, not necessarily unfair, but are much higher in those realms. And my final point, which is more just from more of an opinion piece, I would say. But if you go to games, whether it's football, baseball, hockey, whatever, you see a lot of signs such as, Aaron Rodgers, will you marry me? Or like Derek Jeter, will you marry me? And so there's always those signs asking people out to the prom, asking them to go out with them, and then, like I said, even proposing to them. And I don't think you really see that at women's games as much. I think it's more calm.
True. What would you say, Ryan?
Well, I think it's really interesting, Rob, that you bring up those SI swimsuits, or specifically the ESPN body issues, because, well, does feature both male and females. The males a lot of time are holding balls or in situations related to their sports, where I feel like when they feature women, it's not highlighting the actual talent as athletes.
Good point.
I mean, yeah, absolutely. And I think going back to my first point, it's unfortunate at times, but I believe that they are more sexualized because it unfortunately has to do something else to sell to their predominantly male audiences, and it's kind of a shame. But yeah, with the ESPN body issue, it's not highlighting how hard they've worked to achieve these bodies and achieve their athletic skill. It's unfortunate.
Now, talking about sexualization, let's move over to this question. Does sports glorify masculinity? Ryan, we'll start with you.
Yeah, there was a really interesting study I found by Earl Smith. He found something really interesting in his book, Sociology of Sports and Social Theory. What he basically broke down was it didn't matter male or female, these athletes still had to work hard and could not just rely on their pure skill, rather their masculinity. So they still had to train hard, they were still hitting the gym, they were still working out. And masculinity didn't play as big as a role as many people think.
Rob?
That's an interesting point, Ryan, but I'm going to have to disagree with you. There was a recent article by the Huffington Post CEO, Gary Parker, where he dates back that sports are almost created for males to kind of glorify masculinity and to create that perfect male idea. And he dates it back to the Olympic founder in the 19th century that there was this wave in Europe and the U.S. In the contemporary world that people were actually fearful that boys were becoming too feminized. So they created sports and these competitions to kind of for males that almost females have just adopted. I do agree that it's good that they're both involved now, but I kind of think that at its core it was more created for the male and to kind of create that perfect male. Another quote by Gary Parker says that sports celebrates a hypermasculinity where manhood is measured in muscles. I mean, and I think you guys can all agree that the idea of the perfect male and the top draft picks and stuff like that are kind of these like perfect male epitomes.
Fantastic point.
That's for sure. Now we're going to move this gender conversation over to our weekly Jake Take. Take it away, Jake.
Thanks, Christian. I'm Jack Monahan, and I'm going to talk about the role women have played in sports and media and how it's developed over the last 30 years. Susan Douglas had a fascinating article about women's roles in the 1970s and how they were mostly portrayed as nothing more than sex objects and weren't really given any kind of a chance to thrive in media careers and sports careers. This has changed greatly over the last 30 years as we've seen people like Aaron Austin get an opportunity working with Fox, doing football, doing all that kind of stuff. And we've also seen a lot of teams, beat reporters, are females. We look at the Yankees and they have Meredith Marakovitz. The Knicks had Tina Savasio for a while. And it just shows the development that our country has made over the last 30 years. I mean, you go back to 1968 and there were busloads of women showing up down in Atlantic City protesting that they weren't getting enough rights, they weren't having enough of an opportunity in media field, in the sports field. And in the 1970s, Times Magazine and other magazines were being sued because of the way that they were portraying women and how they weren't getting enough credit for the role that they believed that they could play in media and sports. I'm Jack Monahan, and I'll pass it back over to Ryan, Christian, and Rob.
Thanks for the take, Jake. Now, for our next question, do you think female athletes garner the same amount of attention in sports media as male athletes? Rob, we'll start with you.
I'm going to have to say no. There was a recent article called It's Due Time, a Quarter Century of Excluding Women's Sports in Televised News and Highlight Shows by Cheryl Cookie, Michael Messner, and Michaela Musto, where they actually note that in the coverage of ESPN's Sports Center, Fox Sports 1's Fox Sports Live, and Billings Young, that each program featured women's sports less than 1% of the time. And going off that, there was a recent USC study that LA-based networks devoted only 3.2% of airtime to women's sports, which was down from 5% in 1989. I mean, that was almost, that was shortly after the women's rights era, and we've actually declined since then. And like we said before, Sports Center, I mean, less than 1%. And there was also a study that found that broadcasters devoted 75% of their sports reports to football, basketball, and baseball, which was up from 2009, but those are predominantly male sports.
Now, what do you think, Ryan?
Well, it's really funny actually that you bring up ESPN because let's turn to their top 100 athletes that they do on almost a regular basis. I mean, some of the great female athletes are listed there. Serena Williams, Ronda Rousey. Just personally talking about Abby Wambach, one of the most fiercest and one of the greatest competitors of all time, both male and female to ever grace the football field. I think, yes, that there are some really strong female figures out there that I just mentioned for both young girls and even boys to look up to.
Now, for our final question, we've talked a lot about women, but on the male side, what's an athlete that doesn't really live up to the ideal masculine player, but still is a great athlete? Ryan, we'll start with you.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I think there's a lot of great athletes to look at here. This was actually a more interesting study to look at the preponderance of social media more so, because we're able to view these athletes in a more vulnerable light, some more closer situations, more intimate situations than before. One athlete in particular, probably one of the most popular athletes in the entire world, LeBron James. Scrolling through his entire Instagram or even his Twitter page, you see him being goofy with his wife or drinking wine and listening to slow jams. It's really refreshing, and now kids can look up to these idols and say, you know what, I don't have to be a macho man, for example. I can be the man I want to be. Masculinity now can mean a number of different things.
Now, what about you, Rob?
I'm gonna have to say that LeBron James was a great example, but I'm gonna say David Beckham. I mean, he's now retired, but he's still a big figure in the sports world. And in Rosalind Gill's article about gender, she kind of brings up the idea of sexual objectification and how it's routine for most males to kind of be really masculine, but how since 1988 that idea has been in crisis. And David Beckham shows really that he's not afraid to kind of touch on both sides, or whether it's more of like a feminine side or masculine side on the football field. And we can see that from his apparent lack of self-assertion, and he's kind of a challenge to the heterogenic masculinity. And you can really see this in The Real David Beckham, the documentary that was back in the early 2000s, where he's not afraid to show his relationship with his wife or his kids. He goes shopping, he helps with the designs. A lot of these tasks that might be seen as more feminine, more like, oh, leave that to the woman, he's not afraid to embrace that and really show the true David Beckham.
Fantastic documentary you brought
Yeah.
up. Have to agree.
All right, that's all the time we have for Buehler's Debaters. We want to thank you for watching. For Robert Skowski, Ryan Clayton, I'm Christian Gardner. We'll see you later.